Hello everyone, and welcome to a special preview lore tour for the level 73 Shadowbringers MSQ dungeon, which I had the immense delight and privilege of playing through in London for the media tour. It's been a while, but most of you know how this works. If you don't, we're going to run through the dungeon whilst rambling about all the associated lore we know and might speculate on, as well as the neat little references scattered throughout. There's a bunch of these on the channel for other dungeons, so check them out sometime. You'll have to forgive me, first for being sick and a little raspy here, and secondly for the whole bunch of Gaelic words we find in here that are a pain in the ass to pronounce, so I'm probably going to butcher one or two. So don't at me, okay? I'm a sick boy, and I'm doing my best. We'll talk about what exactly we're doing here in a moment, but first let's talk about Dohn Mheg's primary denizens, the Fleur. I think I'm saying that right. Fleur literally means hate in Old Irish. These are a kind of Gaelic water spirits, often substituted for the Kelpie in English translations, with a curious penchant for wearing green. Shadowbringers has taken some license here and made them resemble some kind of frog imp with the mischievous characteristics of a seelie fae instead of the malevolent nature with which they are usually prescribed. As we discover from exploring here and Dohn Mheg, the Fae kingdom of Novrant is actually made up of several fairy races, including the Pixies, Numo, and now Fleur. Fleur was also the name of an NM in Final Fantasy XI, which is just a blue pixie reskin, so that's pretty neat. Dohn is a word from the Fae language invented by Oda-san and Koji for Shadowbringers, so we do not yet have any idea what it means. But it is evocative of the Irish word doina, from the term doina she, for the inhabitants of mounds believed to be the home of fairies and/or gateways to the fairy world. Although she is the word for mound and doina refers to the people, it's possible that Dohn is a derivative term for the domain of the Novrantian fae. So Dohn fast then. If we take Dohn to refer to the domain of the Fae, or at least some aspect of it, the word fast was, in Old English, less about speed or quickness, and more taken to mean secure, bound, or fortified. In modern English, we use fastened or steadfast to clarify. If we extrapolate, Dohn fast likely refers to a fairy keep or fortress. The anemone, other than the sea anemone of course, is a genus of flower. The word literally means wind flower from the Greek anemone for winds. The Fae have a special relationship with flowers, which is no doubt obvious from the space around us and several of the creatures which we encounter here. Morpho is a type of butterfly we also find in Eorzea, found in Central and South America. It's named for one of the many epithets for Aphrodite. These Donfast baskets are basically flower golems. A fate in Dohn Mheg implies that they are created by the Pixies in order to more efficiently spread and pollinate fields of flowers. Evidently, they're quite capable of defending the Fae territories as well. Etain for the Etain moth has a dual meaning. Etain means pewter in French, but in Irish, this spelling, pronounced Edun, is the name of the second wife of the hero Midhir from the epic tales of Tuatha De Danann. Midhir's first wife, in her jealousy, transformed Edun into a butterfly, cursed for years to be unable to alight anywhere but the rocky crags of the ocean, eventually landed in a glass of wine, drunk by a woman who subsequently became pregnant and gave birth to a reborn Edun. Irish mythology is pretty wild. I don't have much to grasp onto for the first boss, Anchthon, until we have a primer on the Fae language from Koji, so no doubt we'll have to revisit this dungeon at that time, but we can take a moment to speculate on our purpose for being here. Dohn Mheg is going to be the level 73 story mode dungeon for the expansion. We know this because it facilitates the trust system, which has only been developed for MSQ dungeons. It's interesting that at this point in the story, we have already reunited with all of our Scion allies. The only one that was not available for this dungeon was Y'shtola. I think the fact that we can take Alphino in here also excludes him from being old Crystal Hand McGee from the Circus Tower. After exploring the perpetual light of Novrant, it's pretty noticeable how dark it is here. Constant daylight everywhere else, but twilight here. Twilight is important to the Fae in Gaelic tradition. It is during the hours of dawn and dusk that our world and the other world, the realm of gods, spirits, and fairy, draws closest together. and crossings may be attempted. It's not clear that this part of Dohn Mheg, called the Hidden Gardens, is a physical space on Novrant as opposed to a noumenal space, like parts of the lower section of the Antitower in Eorzea, for example. If it is a physical space, then our experience, at least, is an illusion. We enter Dohn Mheg via a magical gateway on the southern shore of Long Mirror Lake in Il Mheg. As you approach the entrance, you can actually see the path of the dungeon marked out, moving north towards the castle of Mythi Glorianda, where we are told the regent Titania resides. We'll explore this region more in another video. I don't think that we've actually left Il Mheg at all, but that we have acquiesced to a trial submitted by the Fleur through this Hall of Illusions. It's not actually Twilight, but their magics make it appear so. I don't think it's a stretch to imagine that dusk is sacred to the Fae, and that we're actually here, at least in part, perhaps to seek their knowledge to create darkness in our quest to restore it to the world. We'll see pretty soon that we're actually seeking a crown, which the Fleur are challenging us to retrieve as part of some kind of trial. This dungeon is more of a Saw Kai situation than, say, Castrum Abanya. Thorn even encourages us on our way after we've defeated him, before Alizé comments that we apparently must do more to earn the Crown of Shells, the object of this quest. Perhaps we're trying to unite Faekind and engage their help against the Sin Eaters. We pass through another portal and into the daylight of Wanderlust. Echeveria is a genus of succulents commonly found throughout Central America that often serve as host plants for butterflies. The Echevore here is obviously a kind of vilekin which feeds upon them. The Rowan, or mountain ash, is the common English name for trees and shrubs in the Sorbus genus. The name Rowan comes from the Old Norse verb roinir, to redden, in reference to its red berries. In Norse folklore, the first human woman was carved from a rowan, and they are considered magical. In the British Isles, it was thought of as a tree closely associated with fairies, and it contained powerful magics to guard against witchcraft and enchantments. Its growth would be encouraged nearby houses and farms. Its berries were used to dye clothes, and its twigs would be sewn into coats for this purpose. The berries were also commonly used to flavor ale and mead, make cider, and even today you can easily find rowan berry jam in Scotland. In Eorzea, and apparently on Novrant as well, there is no categorical difference between a bee and a wasp. The latter still produces honey, so it makes sense that the Fae keep wasps to produce honey as well as help pollinate flowers. A Fleur here accidentally drops a nest on our heads, and Alphino and Alizé don't seem terribly impressed. Moss Fungus and Honey Hunter, I think, seem pretty self-explanatory. The second boss we find in the Atelier, a French noun for a guild hall or workshop for fine arts. Maybe this is one of the spaces where the Fleur learn and practice their craft. Here we find what Alizé succinctly describes as a leaf monster. The reference to Grail might not be immediately apparent. Marcel Grail was a French anthropologist active through the early 20th century and lauded for his studies of the Dogon nation of West Africa. He was particularly engaged with their traditions of ritual and magic, and wrote extensively on their mythology and engagement with the ancestral spirits known as the Nomo. Now, the Nomo are amphibious creatures with humanoid upper torsos and legs, but fish-like lower torsos and tails. They were known by the epithet Masters of the Water, and as watchful teachers and guardians of the Dogon people. We've already established that the Fleur here don't actually look anything like they are described in Gaelic folklore. It seems that the inspiration for the physical attributes of Novrant's Fleur come from the Nomo. The name Grail here is clearly then an homage to this inspiration, but the creature itself seems something not unlike the honey-eater bear we fought earlier, evidently a bear host to a parasitic plant. Perhaps Grail here was a beast that wandered into Dohn Mheg, curious of the Fleur like Marcel Grail was of the Nomo, only to be transformed by the Fleur into a host for one of their seedkin parasites. An unsettling thought. Or maybe he's just like a animated tree or something less fun like that. Who knows? From Wanderlust we cross Dohn Tok, a magical bridge over Long Mirror Lake to the foot of a palatial structure, Dohn Laran. This is probably a part of Titania's seat of Mythi Glorianda, given that the throne room here is the same, in which we see the Titania fight during the benchmark trailer, although we do also see Thorn and Growl next to Titania in the benchmark, which it seems unlikely to reflect the actual fight. Where this dungeon leads directly into the Titania trial in Shadowbringers will be interesting to see. In any case, it makes sense for the Water Fae to have a water palace, right? The crown we find inside is obviously a fake out, and we're attacked by Undyne. I'm sure many of our first thoughts were of Undertale here. Undynes first entered the Germanic vernacular in the 13th century as derivatives of the Greek Nereids, benevolent female water spirits and attendants to Poseidon. The Undyne, then, are European elemental nymphs and progenitors of the mermaid. The Undyne has no soul by right. Marriage to a human can earn her a human soul, but if the human male is ever unfaithful to her, he will be cursed to soon die. Kelpies we've talked about in a previous tour, specifically the drowned city of Sculla, but it's worth refreshing. The Kelpie is a Scottish demon, and although able to take human form, usually appears as a wild black horse with backwards hooves, stalking the shores of lochs and rivers, enticing humans to climb onto its back. After so doing, the victim will find themselves unable to dismount, the Kelpie will carry them into the water, drown and devour them before throwing their entrails onto the bank. In many stories, even patting the flank of a Kelpie with a hand will see it stick, allowing the Kelpie to drag its victim down to its death. The happiest Kelpie story ends with a group of children clambering onto its back, save one that merely touches it and escapes only by cutting his own hand off with a pocket knife before it can drag him under to die with his friends. Scottish mothers evidently did not want their children wandering close to deep water. The Naiad is another Greek water nymph, but specifically one of small bodies of fresh water as opposed to the oceanids and nereids of the sea. The springs in which they resided were considered to have magical healing properties and were often the site of animal sacrifices by ritual drowning. The Argonaut Hylas was abducted by beautiful naiads and never seen again, much to the chagrin of Heracles, whom had been both the young man's mentor and lover up to this point. The corpulent appearance of the naiads here on Novrant feels appropriately ironic. Finally, we confront Thorn again, this time in his boastful, lengthsome gait form. Once again, we can't say much about this character without understanding Koji's Fey language and the context of the story, but he appears as some hybrid of an illusionist, bard, and dancer. We quickly see my favorite part of the dungeon here, where the trust system really shines. Every trust NPC you bring in here will handle this mechanic differently, and in a way that is consistent with their personality. Thancred doesn't hesitate, walks along the first length of the path before cheating by using Sakuchi as a gunbreaker to leap across the rest of the gorge. Alizé sprints the whole way, Urianger teleports directly across, Alphino takes it slow and steady, while Minfilia tries very hard to be brave and hide how terrified she actually is. We, however, we can't use any tricks here. I tried Spine Shatter from where Thancred Sakuchi'd, and trust me, it doesn't work. Thorn casts another illusion to transform into a Cthulhu clone, or Shade of Fear, which makes me wonder whether Void Center are also known to the first, or whether the Sin Eaters can also take this form. Alizé steals the Limit Break as soon as it's charged like an asshole, and we complete Thorn's trial to be rewarded with a placeholder of 2 potions, presumably with the real Crown of Shells that we can see in the background and a subsequent series of cutscenes. I'm practically itching to discover what happens next, but unfortunately in this preview build, that's all we get. Dohn Mheg is as much a spectacle as we have come to expect from MSQ dungeons throughout Stormblood. The trust system makes the run a little slow, but as I'm sure you noticed, it also includes a lot of narrative flair, with commentary and unique reactions from each of the signs you choose to bring along. I think it's a great way to experience these dungeons, particularly for the first time when you're not too concerned with face rolling through. I really hope you enjoyed this lore tour, if only to get a taste of the new dungeon from a Dragoon perspective. You can find plenty more of these on the channel from previous expansions, and hopefully plenty more in future. You should also check out my tours of the new zones from the Media Tour preview, as well as my Advanced Dragoon preview and other Shadowbringers preview content. If you'd like to support what I do, then I also stream most days on twitch.tv/EthysAsher, so feel free to drop in anytime. For now, thank you all so much for watching and listening to me ramble, and I hope to see you in Novrant very soon.